إن الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and welcome to Durus Ramadan 2020. Today we're going to be talking about the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fear of Allah, not the fear of other people. So I guess my question is, who are you really afraid of? What are you really afraid of? Like, really examine your life. What are you prioritizing? Are you more emotionally triggered when you realize you forgot to pray, or when you accidentally break your sibling's phone? Which makes you feel more guilty? Fear is a really important part of Islam, because fear is a qualification of Jannah. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. But for he who has feared the position of his Lord are two gardens. Fear is also a qualification to be a believer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Nur,
وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَخْشَ اللَّهَ وَيَتَّقْهِ فَأُولَئِكَ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in Surah At-Tawbah,
أَلَا تُقَاتِلُونَ قَوْمًا نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُمْ وهموا بإخراج الرسول وهم بدأوكم أول مرة أتخشونهم فالله أحق أن تخشوه إن كنتم مؤمنين.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said Surah Al-Anfal,
إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون.
So we see here that it is very important to be afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, simply because it is a qualification to be a believer. It's a qualification to be one of the people of Jannah, which means it's a qualification for this identity that you want. But let's talk about your different identities, right? Let's talk about your different selves. So, everyone has their work self, their family self, friends, who you are around your spouse, who you are alone. And we all give off a certain part of our personality. Like, let's say if you're at work and you see everyone going to pray, you'll probably go and pray with them. And when you're with your family, you'll make sure, you don't use any bad words that, inshallah, you don't use in general. But if you do, you make sure you don't say it in front of your family. And when you're with your friends, you might decide you guys are all going to discuss deen and the importance of salah and all these things. And when you're with your wife, you make sure you lower your gaze. You don't want to hurt her feelings or anything like that. But what do you do when you're alone? When you're not worried about the judgment of other people, or that you'll teach your younger siblings or cousins a bad word, or that you're going to disappoint your wife. So when none of these factors come into play, what really affects your decision making? If you don't self-reflect, how can you be sure? Right? If you're constantly distracting yourself by thinking about outward things like, politics, what's Trump done now, or Corona, this very, very, very serious pandemic that's happening, or your schoolwork, or your job, or any of these things, when do you have time for yourself? I think a pipe burst in my house. But when do you have time for yourself, right? And so, as far as I can see, there's two problems when it comes to fear. Number one is a lack of self-reflection. And number two is overstimulation. So let's say you're somebody who, eats a lot of bad junk food. You know, they like burgers and fries and ice cream and milkshakes and 7-Up and donuts and all these things. You're gonna feel very uncomfortable, sluggish, and all these things afterwards, right? You know, there's a word in Arabic, khumul. It's where you feel very sleepy and drowsy after you eat a lot of food. So you can call that kind of like a physical stagnation. What about your spirit? What about your soul? Are we being serious about the junk that we intake every day? All the bad information that we take in that might also cause our soul to be sluggish, to not feel accountable for our actions or worry about the consequences of our actions. Do you worry enough about the consequences of the things you do? خليك عن the consequences towards other people, or the consequences that might come to you in this world. Are you worried about the consequences of the things you do and the things you don't do في الآخرة? And if you're not really worried about it, it's because these things you hear about torture and chains and fire, they don't send alarms to your brain anymore. If I work in a factory and the first few days that I go there, you know, there's a lot of machinery and it's very, very loud. Over time, I am gonna get used to that, and it's not really gonna register anything in my head. So in the same sense, if you're constantly seeing things and hearing things that are violent and have torture and all these things, the alarms aren't gonna go off in your head. A lot of us know the importance of hope, right? But what we need to understand is that fear is just as important as hope. It is very important to know Inna Allah Ghafur Rahim, but it is just as important to know Inna Allahu Shadidul Iqab. Think of it like a bird with two wings. One wing is hope, one wing is fear. You need both to be able to fly straight, otherwise you're going to lean one way or the other. So what can we do to increase our fear in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hopefully qualify inshaAllah for Jannah and to be considered a true believer? Well, number one, read Quran. That is going to give you all the descriptions of Nar Jahannam as long as with a hadith of Rasulullah. Number two, read about the grave. Read about the qabr, what's going to happen. Read about Judgment Day, the descriptions of heaven and hell. And very importantly, decrease your intake of junk that distracts you. The things that you don't need to be reading or hearing or seeing, especially in the month of Ramadan. And inshallah, all of us will increase in fear and be considered one of those who are the true believers and those who recognize their flaws and try to overcome them. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'll see you guys tomorrow.